Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. As you know, this is Mary Baker, and I'm welcoming you back to episode 33, Environments, the Company You Keep. So this month, like I said last week, we're going to be talking about the old nature-nurture concept, about environments, your personal environments, and why they are so crucial for our well-being. Last week, we defined this concept in a high-level way and practice focusing on what would be wonderful to have in our lives. I hope you enjoyed that exercise, and I hope that you continue to do that as you go. This week, I want to talk about, in my view, the most important environmental variable, the people around us, the people in our lives, and especially the not-so-healthy folks who can have a tremendous impact on our well-being, whether we're aware of that or not. These could be family, these could be your partner, these could be your child, could be your sibling, coworker, or even your neighbor. All right, but before we go there, I just want to give a shout out to those of you who are really spreading the word on this podcast. Thank you. I'm hearing such great things about how helpful the podcast is and that you're excited to share it. So that's great. Wonderful to hear. Keep doing that. Again, the healthier people get on this planet, the better this planet will be, right? Okay. So I want to define toxicity a little bit. I also want to refer folks back to earlier episodes on assertiveness and boundaries. Go back through if you haven't done so. If you haven't listened to them already, or if you need a re-listen, that might be helpful here. But let's talk about what I mean by toxic. Toxic is unhealthy. A toxic person is unhealthy emotionally, usually unhealthy psychologically. Perhaps there is emotional immaturity going on there. There's passive-aggressive behavior. There's manipulation. There's acting out. They're not very grounded or mature, calm, and emotionally safe to be around. So emotional safety, I think, is the best way that you can capture all of that. And so there are different levels of toxicity. Everything's on a continuum, I think. And it's up to you to assess as you listen today about where those relationships are. And even that can really be a process of uncovering. So don't be hard on yourself if all of a sudden you realize, crap, I got some unhealthy people around me. That's okay. The fact that they're unhealthy made it hard for you to see the healthy, if that makes sense. One of the areas that we can have a lot of toxicity is at work. And even if you work from home and you are dealing with people via phone and email and online, it's still the same deal, so you're not exempt. We've all heard the term hostile work environment. If you haven't, the basic definition of that is whenever you feel uncomfortable at work due to another person's abusive, defensive, intimidating, harassing, or otherwise, in my book, any immature behavior that isn't mitigated by management. Usually because management is not healthy enough to tackle that, and that's a whole other session. I think we really underestimate the toxicity here and the trap. I say trap because what if you really need this job? What if you cannot leave this job at this time? You need to eat. There may be other things you love about the work, and it may be hard to leave right now. And remember how many hours you spend at work. If you work full time, you're spending almost as much time at work as you are at home. That's kind of our second family too. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that there are similar emotional and psychological impacts, right? Because families are supposed to be safe, ideally. Safe enough, good enough. Not perfect, just good enough. my counseling work over the years, wow, did I run into many, many situations, time after time, where the impacts of the toxicity at work on a person's well-being was just crazy. It was really, really sad to see. Not just the mental health either of my clients. I'm talking about physical health. Their blood pressure, their weight, their cholesterol, their migraines, inability to sleep, tons of anxiety and depression, crazy physical symptoms that no one could explain. So don't underestimate how important a healthy work environment is. And look around in your life and see, even if there's just one coworker who is really difficult to deal with, the bigger question is, what is management doing about it? Because if management isn't doing anything about it, then yeah, good luck, right? I mean, I think you know by now, you've been listening long enough, that you might have to walk away eventually, or find a different way, or get transferred, or whatever you need to do to set boundaries around your well-being, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. It's even harder when that toxic person is your direct supervisor, because what I hear a lot from clients is the fear that if they go somewhere else and they need a job reference and that new job calls your current supervisor, the fear is how that is going to go. So I think I want to stop for a moment and talk about power in relationships. And speaking truth to power can be very, very difficult, especially when power, the person in power, is not healthy. Unfortunately, we don't have strict criteria in most workplaces for emotional maturity in order to become a boss or a manager. Speaking truth to power can be very intimidating and can be a process. So I just want to speak to that. And for all of us to really be cognizant of our own power with others. If you're a boss, if you're a manager, if you're a project lead, I just want you to think about the impact that you are having on those who count on you for their evaluation, for those who count on you for their employment. Their mental health matters, and I can promise you that if you focus on their mental health, your bottom line will be so much better off. All right, so work environment. We'll take a look at that and see if it's toxic or unhealthy for you. Okay, so the next big one, what most people talk about, is having a toxic partner or spouse and the impacts that can have. Any emotionally unsafe or immature behavior is the bucket that I throw all of this in. And my bar is pretty high in terms of healthy expectations of mature behavior in relationships. Because you've heard me say, without emotional safety, without boundaries, you cannot have trust. And everything emanates from there. Defensiveness is toxic, people. I mean, on some level, it can be seen as rather benign. I don't know if any of us have not been defensive at some point. But it's not all that benign, I think, when that's all you're getting in a chronic way. Like when you ask for something or confront in a really loving, healthy way, and you are met with defensiveness and nasty and shutting down and not speaking to you for 3 days, or blowing up and teaching you with rage that you should not confront. That's not okay. It's not okay because it creates like a PTSD response within you over time. You walk on eggshells, but it can be extremely crazy-making and invalidating. And again, you're not going to have any trust, because until people take personal responsibility for self in a relationship, you can't have trust. And you can't have hope that things are actually going to get better until that happens. The other big thing is verbal abuse, shaming. And they don't have to be yelling at you to shame you. You know, the you always, the you never statements, the why did you and why can't you and why. Guys, that's not a question, remember? It's a statement finished with the connotation of what the hell is wrong with you? You're an idiot. You're not good enough. Statements like, are you sure you want that? Are you going to eat all of that? Really? Sure you can handle that? Undermining, shaming, giving the connotation there's something less than about you. The obvious ones are the name calling and the attacking and threatening behavior. Not okay. I don't care if people say, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that one over the years. I look those people lovingly in the eye and I say, it does not matter. If you said it, you need to own it. And if it's not true, it's even worse because then you're just effing with your partner. You're messing with your child. They don't know what to trust. At least if you follow through, they could trust that. Don't say what you don't mean, and you don't get the excuse of, I was just upset. The other area is enmeshment, where there aren't any boundaries. Go back and listen to the boundaries episodes. There's 2 months of those if you're not sure what I'm talking about here. When I say enmeshment, I typically mean you feel responsible for other people's happiness, their feelings, their choices, and their behaviors. You lose yourself over time in these relationships because there's no boundary between where you end and they begin. Not okay. Even in seemingly loving and happy relationships where people are really enmeshed with each other, what comes to mind is when people fall in love, they can become real enmeshed in the beginning and they join. After a while, that's going to become a problem. The irony is when I work with couples, the more enmeshment going on, ironically, the more fighting, the more conflict, and the more disconnect. So go figure. When you hear them talking about other people in negative ways, and that focus is usually there around other people in their life, like bitching and moaning about the people at work and everyone else, believe me, you're next. You are not safe. I don't care what we tell ourselves. You are next. Especially if this is a new relationship for you, look out. That's one of the red flags you really want to look out for. Because if they're talking smack about other people, you're not immune to that because they're going to do that with everyone. They're just not going to do that obviously up front. And it's going to seem so valid and they're such a victim and so righteous. Be very careful. They're not emotionally safe. Emotionally safe people may mention something that they're upset about, what this person did, but then they quickly bring it back to themselves and they're like, okay, well, I need to figure this out, or I need to love them from a distance, or I need to set a boundary, or let them go. The other big dynamic that I see, especially in partnerships, are parent-child dynamic, where one person is self-appointed, usually the parent, feeling overly responsible, the only one who thinks about, okay, when are the bills getting paid, what time is dinner, who's going to get groceries, and the other person plays the child role where they kind of, oops, sorry, I forgot to pick up milk on the way home, and I don't know when my bills are supposed to be paid. So this can create a very toxic relationship, I think, because you can't be healthy partners and parent or child. You can't pull off both. Nobody can. You parent your partner because deep down you're afraid, or they've shown you cannot count on them to be self-directive and responsible and mature and proactive. Maybe you're the child because you have some immaturity going on. I don't say that in a demeaning way. There's just some places to grow, shall we say, in terms of being like more self-disciplined, more realistic. Usually the dreamer in the relationship is deemed the child because they don't get it, because in the parenting partner, it feels like the child partner does not get reality. And so then they feel very alone. And then if you're feeling like the child, you're probably feeling really controlled and abused. And so there's some rebelliousness there. There's some rebellion there and some acting out. You're made to feel bad for your decisions. Things like that. Okay. Toxic, abusive relationships. Some stuff is obvious. Some stuff is not. I mean, one thing I talk about often is manipulation. The real insidious, invisible, nasty, manipulative behavior that is on the surface looks real innocent and normal, but your gut is twisting and you don't feel safe and your guard goes up. That's all you need to know. If you feel the yuck, you're being manipulated. So refer to episode 14 around manipulation. That's where I get into more of it there. Oh, I could spend many an episode just scratching the surface of manipulative behavior. Because it is so insidious, it takes a while to explain, yeah, that's not healthy. If someone punched you, it would be obvious. You both saw that and you're not crazy. That happened. Passive-aggressive behavior and manipulation is a little harder to detect at first. Go by how you feel. Compare it to other relationships where you can relax and be yourself and open up and feel safe. Then you can start unpacking it. Basically, toxic relationships don't have healthy boundaries. You've heard me say many a time on these episodes, if you're in an adult relationship that's toxic, it's probably because you grew up with toxic people and may not even realize that. All you need to know is that was probably the case and you drew this grown-up person to you. Probably as you look back over your life, you've had more than one relationship that was not healthy, even friendships. I mean, if manipulation and shaming and sarcasm and things like that were normalized growing up, it's going to be harder for you to detect that maybe that's not so great because it feels so normal. So if you grew up with manipulation, abuse, or other accompanying struggles like poverty or addiction, it's no surprise why you may have toxic around you today. We draw it to us with imaginary magnet where we replay the old tapes in our life. It is not your fault if this is going on, and it is your responsibility if you want to change that. The other thing I want to point out, and this is important, if you grew up in a family where you lost yourself and people lost themselves, even in very loving codependent families where everyone else's needs were put in front of like mom's needs, let's say, she modeled that for you. Unbeknownst to her, she modeled don't put yourself first in healthy ways. She modeled poor boundaries. She modeled low self-esteem. She modeled martyring and managing and manipulating. All that stuff. So you're influenced by the slow adaptation of what and who is around you. Okay, what about kids? I want to talk about two different categories of that. If you have younger children, I want to say like 16 and younger, and it's constant chaos, that can feel really toxic after a while. I work with many people around the struggle to have sanity in the home, unfortunately, because they didn't know how to set healthy boundaries with their kids early in life. And or they're the only ones enforcing boundaries and they have the good cop, bad cop syndrome going on with their partner, with the kid's other parent or their step parent or what have you. So that can create a lot of oppositional behavior, which is exhausting. You guys know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about with the tantrums and the meltdowns and feeling like you have to ask them to do something 16 times and then blow your top before they finally get off the couch and clean up the living room kind of thing. That is poor boundaries. And so that can become very toxic after a while. It sets up a nasty cycle where almost you become toxic because you're frustrated, you get snappy, you yell at the kids, and you don't want to, and it can come off kind of shamey and shitty to the kids over time. Not saying that to make you feel bad, but I think if you've been listening to these episodes long enough, you know where I'm going. It's really to understand with compassion that when there aren't boundaries in parenting, it can't be healthy. And it can't be healthy for your kids. And I know you want to be a healthy, loving parent. I know that because you would not be listening if that weren't the case. So my encouragement around that is to really look into some healthy parenting techniques where you can detach, let the child be in a place of choice between their bennies and their consequences of their behavior. You give them one heads up, then you remind them what their choice was. They chose to hit their brother, so bummer, they can't watch TV. You do it with empathy, and you quietly follow through, and they can trust you, and your anxiety goes way down. See, we're anxious because we're worried about them not doing their homework. We want them to worry about doing their homework and acting right and cleaning their room. The other category is adult children, older, maybe 18 and up, even if they just graduated and they're still living in the home. Again, similarly, if there weren't great boundaries with them growing up in your house, this is going to be tricky. So learning how to detach and treat them with respect and create contracts with them is really important, but also learning how to not rescue them and not let them walk all over you or treat you badly. That can be really toxic and consuming. Those of you who are experiencing this know exactly what I mean. So get some really good counseling or relationship coaching around that and get some support around you if you need to make big changes in this area. All right. What about our favorite group, our family of origin? So I'm not going to dive too deep into this. I think I've done that enough in earlier episodes. But basically, this is where you may need to detach with love, set some healthy boundaries, let go, walk away, have loving conversations, whatever is appropriate given the situation, to take care of yourself. Family of origin can be so toxic, especially I think if they're just not that healthy and they can't meet your needs and you keep going back and you keep going back and you keep going back to the well looking for fresh water, you're not going to get it. They can't yet. They may get it together, get some help, get some counseling, who knows. But right now, loving them where they are, understanding maybe the limited fashion that they can be there for you and you can be there for them. Setting healthy boundaries, getting straight with reality yourself can be really important. This is probably the hardest group to say no to and to set limits with. Like we've talked about before, we're not supposed to, quote unquote, have to disconnect from family. Family's supposed to be loving and kind and healthy and there for us. But sometimes they're not. And sometimes it's your sanity or hanging out with them, and you have to choose. All right, so I think you have a sense of what toxicity can look like in these relationships at work and at home, with kids, with grown-ups in your life, with family, with neighbors. If it's toxic, and it is going to have an impact on you. That's what matters. I know you're going to need some time to kind of walk through all of what I just threw at you today, and that's okay. My hope is that this can start a conversation inside your heart between you and yourself, and hopefully some other healthy folks so that you can sort this out. All right. So I want to talk about just some data points around healthy relationships. And some of this you probably already know, but I just thought it'd be a good time to talk about some of these again. The first one is like attracts like. We attract what and where we are, even if we hate to hear that. If we are miserable deep down and immature, if we're struggling, if we're manipulative and defensive, wounded, we're going to attract and feel comfort with like-minded people. And we probably don't see that on the surface. We probably assume, they grew up like I did and they get it and finally someone understands me, but we have to do the math. If they didn't do work on that, there's going to be some shit coming down the road in this relationship. So what are you attracting? Think for a moment. And do you like who you are? We will attract people right where we are. And if we have some wounds there, we're going to attract wounded people. Until we start healing some of those wounds and taking responsibility for honoring that we deserve better. We deserve people who are completed projects-ish. Good enough. They've gotten it together enough or they're really working on it. The other thing is we get exactly what we focus on. What I mean by that is we can focus on the problem in our relationships or the solution. We can make a choice every moment of every day around this. So sometimes your relationships aren't like terribly toxic, but you're not able to be solution focused because you probably didn't grow up that way and you're probably trying to stay in the fear-based self-protective mode. Always bringing up issues, always pointing out what your spouse does wrong is a lot less vulnerable than thanking them this morning for making the bed, or listening to you last night when you were upset, or skipping what they effed up and say, hey, can we do this instead? Can we do dishes together, as opposed to you forgot to do them again? So looking at the negativity that comes out of our mouths is really, really helpful. We're not going to solve problems by only focusing on the problem. So we're only as healthy as the relationships we have around us, right? And what do yours look like? I mean, are these people on the same page as you? I mean, do you share similar values? We're going to get into values next month. Do you learn from them, and do you walk away from interactions feeling uplifted, enhanced, or challenged in a good way? Loved? Warm? Connected? If not, you may want to take a look at that. And conversely, are we doing that for other people? That's another fun challenge to give ourselves, right? How am I being to those who walk up to me today? That's something we have control over, which I like. Another thing, the fear of intimacy is really just the fear of truth. Intimacy means into me see. And if we're so afraid that they're going to see inside of us and not like what they see because we don't think it's good enough, or that they may reject us, we're not going to open up. We'll pull people close to us and then shut down, or we'll never really pull them close at all and have kind of a surface connection with them. No one's getting needs met that way, guys. Do you know that? Unconditional love, as you know by now, is an inside job. As you begin to love yourself no matter what, continue to work on what you want to change, and take responsibility for your life, you're going to become more comfortable with who you bring to the table. You hear me say that all the time. Yes, we need healthy environments. But I also think it's our job to love us if we want that from others. People can feel this intuitively when you become more self-loving and self-accepting and grounded. They cannot fix your self-esteem, and you cannot fix theirs. I think that interdependent relationships, two independent people negotiating, are the ones that work long term, because we have to hold on to who we are to be happy with them. It's the only way it works, period. And finally, we need to accept reality of who and where people are. You know, we often go into relationships, like I've said before, just seeing what we want to see. And then we're terribly disappointed. We need to get real. We need to pay attention to our intuition. We need to stop beating them over the head because they can't be what we need. The choice is ours to stay or not. We should not put that on other people, because that's manipulative in itself. It's like we're putting it on them. I want you to be different because I don't have the balls to walk away from you. I want you to be different so I don't have to look at my own woundedness that helped me pick you in the first place, where you never could be what I needed. Or maybe not yet. All right, so those are some basic tenets of healthy relationships: healthy boundaries, healthy emotional honesty, people staying on their side of the street. There are ground rules that people follow. There's shared values. There's shared meaning. There is a level of vulnerability and intimacy. We're getting needs met. So I want to take a moment and do an experiential exercise. If you've been listening to the episodes, you know what these are. I'm going to give you 3 sentence starters or sentence stems. And I just want you, without thinking, quickly come up with 2 to 4 endings. If you're writing these out later, go ahead and do 4 to 6 endings. They can be positive, negative, in between, it doesn't matter. And so I'm going to read these and play some music and give you a moment. If you're walking or if you're driving or doing something, just notice what comes up in your head and heart. It's great to go back later and play it again and write these down, and do this several times this week, because you might get different really cool stuff coming up. All you need to know is what comes up is your truth, and you can trust it. You may not like it, but you can trust it. All right, here we go. Number 1. If I were to bring more awareness to who is around me, if I were to bring more awareness to who is around me, Number 2, some of the impacts my relationships are having on me. Some of the impacts my relationships are having on me. And number 3, if I were to operate in healthier ways with others. If I were to operate in healthier ways with others. Okay, so what came up for you? Were you surprised by your answers? Were some of them confusing? It's okay. Just take some time this week and kind of think that through. Maybe talk to a trusted person about them if you want. There are more of these in the bonus download, which I will get to in a minute, so that you can do some more deep dives into your real truth. All right, so today we explored the concept of what I think is your most important environment, the people in your life. We dove into some of the impacts of toxicity and hopefully contrasted these with healthy concepts so you can get a sense of where you are. If you identify toxic people in your life, I strongly encourage you to work with someone, if you're not already doing so, to move through change for you. You cannot do this alone, especially if you have toxic around you and have had that for a while, because it's so unhealthy, it's messed with your head. It takes a while for you to detach and get grounded in your truth again and to be able to actually see and think clearly and come out of the fog, so to speak. Also, the rule of thumb is the unhealthier the person is, the harder it is to disengage from the drama. They are not going to say, oh, yeah, I understand. I've been treating you really badly. I guess you do need to step back. No, you're going to freak them out. Don't do this alone. You're going to need an army of support around you. So, thank you again for joining me today. If you want to continue your work with the sentence exercise, there's more of those in your bonus download that you received in your tribe newsletter today. If you're not a tribe member yet, just go to ownitpowercast.com and sign up. You'll get your newsletter every Tuesday. That's pretty much all I send to people. I try to keep everything in that one newsletter so I'm not blowing up your inbox because I don't like to be spammed, so I promise not to do that to you. All right. So, if you found this helpful, please pass this episode along and leave a positive review on whatever platform you are listening on. You will be helping others find this podcast and get the help that they need. All right, pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.